I pulled into the cramped parking lot of the Pancake Parlor in a sleepy corner of Brighton at exactly 11:23 on a Sunday morning. My body felt like I'd been run over by a lorry after an exhausting 6-hour shift that started before the birds had even stirred. My shoulders ached, my back was stiff as a board, and all I could picture was collapsing into bed, maybe with a leftover curry from the night before. But my wife's texts had been piling up all morning. First at 8, then 9:30, then a desperate 10:45 message bursting with question marks. Honestly, I'd completely forgotten about the brunch. Work had swallowed me whole, and I hadn't even glanced at my phone. Yet here I was. I'd showered quickly back at home, swapped my grimy work shirt for a clean one, and pulled on my trusty jeans. The drive from our modest flat in Hove to West Brighton had been slow. Parking was a nightmare, so I'd settled for a spot half a mile away. The walk gave me time to brace myself for what felt like a performance I was about to give. Me, the bloke who fixed boilers for a living, stepping into a world of marketing managers, PR gurus, and other Sunday brunch regulars who seemed to float above the grind on a cloud of mimosas and avocado toast. From half a block away, I could hear the high-pitched, rehearsed laughter drifting out from the cafe's outdoor patio. The kind of laughter that announces, "Yes, we're having the best time. Please look at us." Should have taken that as a sign to turn around and head home. But I didn't. I sat down at the table where my wife and her friends were already ensconced in their designer sunglasses and carefully curated outfits. She didn't rise or greet me with anything more than a slight wave, as if I was an inconvenient afterthought. The conversation barely skipped a beat. They were deep in planning a luxury spa weekend in Bath. Boutique hotels, poolside cabanas, and champagne bottles that probably cost more than my weekly wage. I ordered a black coffee, no frills, hoping it would keep me awake through the performance. No one asked how my morning had gone. No one noticed the exhaustion etched on my face. I was just background noise, the husband who worked with his hands while they worked in offices, the guy who didn't quite belong. One of the women, Melanie, who worked in property management, threw me a cursory, "How's work?" But it felt more like ticking a box than genuine interest. Before I could answer, my wife cut in with a sharp, "He's always working," without even glancing at me. I basically live like a single woman. The table erupted in laughter, the kind that stings because it's not really funny. Like I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't even known I was part of. I glanced at their faces, polished, smug, and utterly indifferent. I'd been supporting most of our bills, carrying more than my share of the mortgage, but none of that mattered here. They moved on, chatting about boutique shopping in the lanes and griping about their own relationships, while the mimosas kept flowing and my wife's voice grew louder, more performative with each sip. And then she said it. Leaning back with a glass raised like a trophy, she announced for all to hear, "Honestly, I give this marriage 6 months tops." The laughter exploded again, louder, more vicious, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. It was a punchline rehearsed, delivered to an audience that found it hilarious. I sat there, the coffee cooling in my hand, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Something inside me shifted. This wasn't a joke. This was a plan. A performance I was only now waking up to. Without a word, I slipped my wedding ring off and placed it squarely on the table between 2 glistening mimosa glasses. The tiny metallic clink sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. I stood up, chair scraping harshly against the concrete, and looked each of them in the eye. They looked away. I turned to my wife, her face draining of color, then flushing red with panic. "Enjoy your brunch," I said, then walked out into the glaring Brighton sun, my heart pounding, my future suddenly as uncertain as the tide. The sun hit me like a spotlight as I stepped onto the pavement, the chatter and clinking glasses fading behind me like the closing act of a cruel play. I slid on my sunglasses, not to hide tears. There weren't any, but to shield myself from the world I just left behind. The streets of West Brighton buzzed with weekend banter, couples laughing over ice creams, families pushing prams, but none of it felt real anymore. I was a ghost walking through a town that suddenly felt alien. I didn't rush. I walked at a steady pace, weaving through the crowds, pretending this was just another Sunday, the way I usually did after a long shift. The weight of the silence I left behind at the cafe settled heavy on my chest. I could still hear her voice, that scornful proclamation echoing in my mind. 6 months tops. It wasn't just a prediction. It was a countdown. When I reached my car, parked 4 blocks away on a quiet side street, I unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, and just sat there for a moment. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, adrenaline crashing through me like a wave. The calm I'd been clinging to shattered, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. I tried to breathe slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the one thing they teach you in those stress management workshops at work. But the tightness in my chest didn't ease. My phone buzzed relentlessly in my pocket. I pulled it out, saw my wife's name flashing on the screen again and again. 8 messages already, each one more desperate than the last. Where did you go? Come back now. This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing me. Please, can we just talk? The repeated pleas felt like acid on fresh wounds. I ignored it all, let the calls ring out, watched her name blink until it switched to voicemail. The phone buzzed again. Another call. And another. I stared at the screen, imagining her sitting alone in that same cafe. Mascara streaked, her hands trembling as she typed and deleted messages. I typed back a single line. Nothing left to talk about. Hit send. The phone rang instantly, like she was holding it, listening, waiting. I answered, voice low and steady. Where are you? Her voice cracked through the speaker, thick with tears and panic. You can't be serious. Everyone's staring at me. That's not my problem anymore, I said flatly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Dad, you're throwing away our marriage over a joke, she sobbed. The drama in her tone was theatrical, like she was auditioning for a soap opera. I just made it official, I replied. Where are you? She pressed again, desperation mounting. I hung up before I could say anything else. Blocked her number. The screen confirmed. Contact blocked. I leaned back against the headrest, the silence inside the car deafening. 5 years unraveled in 6 minutes, just like I'd predicted. I started the engine but didn't head home. Not yet. The house felt like a mausoleum of memories now, the walls echoing with everything I wished I could forget. Instead, I drove toward something easier, something familiar. Sherman Oaks. Coleman's place. Coleman and I had been mates since school. Quiet, steady, the kind of bloke you could count on without asking twice. I knocked on his door around 1 in the afternoon. The muffled sound of football filled the flat, a Rams game, naturally. He opened the door, beer in hand, wearing his usual sweats and a faded jersey, and without a word, stepped aside. What happened? He asked once I was inside, eyes narrowing with concern. Need a couch for a few days, I said. You got it, he replied, nodding towards the fridge. Grab a beer. I did, sinking down onto his battered old sofa that smelled of pepperoni and stale beer. A stark contrast to the polished world I just left behind. Coleman muted the TV but left the game on. The quiet hum a reminder that life went on, even when yours was falling apart. We sat there in silence for a while. No awkward questions. No pity. Just the steady presence of an old friend. Later, during a commercial break, Coleman pulled out his phone and ordered 2 large pizzas from the place down the road, pepperoni and sausage. The delivery guy arrived just as the third quarter started, and we ate in companionable silence, watching men in helmets crash into each other on the screen. Finally, at halftime, Coleman turned off the TV and looked at me seriously. Want to talk about it? I gave him the brief version, the brunch, the joke, the laughter, the ring on the table. He shook his head slowly. She said that in public? In front of witnesses? I nodded. Good riddance, mate, he said quietly. You did the right thing. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But as the sun slipped lower outside his window, the quiet weight of what I'd lost settled deeper inside me. And somewhere, buried beneath the ache, a question began to form. Why had she really done it? Morning light filtered weakly through the curtains of Coleman's flat, casting long shadows across the battered sofa where I'd crashed. Sleep had been elusive, My mind replayed every moment from the cafe like a relentless film reel. The laughter, the ring, her words echoing louder than ever. I finally drifted off just before dawn, only to be jolted awake by the relentless buzzing of my phone. 34 missed calls. 52 messages. All from numbers I didn't recognize at first, but quickly pieced together as hers and her friends, their desperate attempts to reach me through every possible channel. Some messages were angry, others pleading, and a few dripping with thinly veiled threats. Melanie's voice stood out in the texts. Sharp, harsh, like a storm cloud. "You're being unreasonable," she wrote, venting frustration rather than concern. I scrolled through them, the words blurring together, but with each message, my resolve hardened. This wasn't love. It was manipulation, a carefully crafted performance designed to pull me back into a play I no longer wanted to star in. I turned my phone off, plunging the screen into darkness, and lay back, staring at the ceiling. The room smelled faintly of stale pizza and beer, but it was the only place that felt real right now. Somewhere I wasn't expected to perform. Somewhere I could just be. Hours later, a message lit up the screen from an unknown number. "It's Taylor from yesterday. Can we talk? It's important." Taylor, the quiet one from brunch. The one who'd sat at the end of the table, mostly silent, observing. I hesitated before showing the message to Coleman, who had emerged from his bedroom looking like a disheveled spectator at life. Hair tousled, t-shirt faded, still in his boxers. He read it, shrugged, and said, "Might be worth hearing what she has to say. Could be useful." I typed back, agreeing to meet for coffee at 8 a.m. sharp at the Starbucks on Ventura Road. I borrowed a clean shirt from Coleman, washed my face, and tried to steady my nerves. Arriving early, I ordered a black coffee and sat in a quiet corner, watching the door. Taylor appeared exactly on time. Gone was the polished, brunch-ready woman. Instead, she looked worn, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, dressed casually in jeans and a sweatshirt. There was an honesty in her eyes that made me hope she was on my side. She sat down without ordering, folding her hands on the table and meeting my gaze. "I couldn't sleep last night," she said quietly. "There are things you need to know." I listened as she laid it out. My wife had been talking about divorce for months, since at least April, planning the whole thing with the group. Lawyers, asset division, timing. Taylor's voice was steady but grim. "She wanted you to be the one to end it," she explained. "Said it would help her case, make you look like the villain." She pulled out her phone and showed me a group chat filled with messages that made my stomach churn. Plans, gossip, even cruel comments about how predictable I was. "She thought you'd just take it," Taylor said. "That you wouldn't fight back." Screenshots flooded my phone. Texts naming lawyers, discussing strategy, laughing about playing the long game. One message stung more than the rest. Asterisk, "He'll probably just take it and not even fight. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." Asterisk. Taylor looked up, her eyes sharp with conviction. "I wanted to make sure you knew what you were really dealing with." I swallowed hard, the truth settling over me like a cold fog. This wasn't some petty argument or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated betrayal. "Are you willing to testify if this goes to court?" I asked. Without hesitation, she nodded. "Absolutely. What she's doing is wrong. I want no part of it." For a brief moment, I saw hope flicker. A chance to fight back, to reclaim what was mine. Taylor smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I left the group chat last night. I'm done with them. They're not the kind of friends I want." We talked a little longer before she left, handing me her number and promising to help however she could. Alone again, I sipped the now lukewarm coffee, staring at my phone and the evidence of a marriage I thought I knew unraveling in my hands. The betrayal wasn't just a joke at brunch. It was a long game I'd been blind to, and as the minutes ticked by, one thought kept gnawing at me. How deep did this deception go? By mid-afternoon, I found myself sitting stiffly in a sleek law office tucked away in Beverly Hills. Coleman had recommended his divorce solicitor, Ms. Riles. A no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. She sized me up in seconds, then pulled out my phone to scroll through the screenshots Taylor had sent. "You left the relationship publicly and decisively," she said, voice clipped but not unkind. "She's been planning this for months. This is actually good for you." I blinked, surprised. Good for me? After everything? Ms. Riles explained the strategy clearly, like she was drawing up a blueprint rather than discussing a marriage unraveling. "File immediately. Don't wait for her to make the first move. We'll request separation of assets based on evidence of premeditated manipulation. No-fault divorce, but the evidence protects you from false claims." She looked me dead in the eye. "She wanted you to be the bad guy. Instead, you look like someone who's had enough. Big difference. 4 to 6 months," she said, was the likely timeline for finalization. She'd handle all communication, and I was to block all contact with my wife, letting the legal team deal with her. Walking out of her office felt strange. Lighter, maybe, or just numb. I'd taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life, but the road ahead still felt uncertain and lonely. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account, changed my direct deposit, and got a P.O. box for mail. Small, practical moves to separate my world from hers. By Tuesday morning, the papers were served. Then came the phone calls to Coleman's number. My wife was trying every angle to reach me, pleading through friends, trying to twist their arms. Coleman answered one call, and her voice spilled out in desperate tones. "Please just tell him to talk to me." Coleman looked at me. I shook my head. "He's got nothing to say to you," Coleman told her before hanging up. Wednesday evening, we arrived at the house to collect my things. A police escort accompanied us, just in case. Her car was in the driveway when we pulled up. She opened the door before I could knock. Her face bare, hair pulled into a messy bun, sweatpants sagging at the waist. Gone was the polished, confident woman from brunch. Now she looked small, vulnerable. "Can we please just—" she started. The officer stepped forward gently but firmly. "Sir is here to collect his belongings. Please let him proceed." 40 minutes later, my life in boxes and bags was loaded into Coleman's truck. My wife stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. As I passed her for the last time, she grabbed my arm. "I didn't mean any of it," she whispered. "I was just showing off." I stopped, looked her dead in the eye. "Then you showed them who you really are." I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, Taylor sent an update. The brunch crew had fractured. After she'd shared the screenshots and the truth, 3 of the 4 friends distanced themselves from my wife. Only Melanie remained loyal. Attempts at hosting wine nights fell flat. Only Melanie showed up. Hearing that didn't bring satisfaction, just a hollow echo of loss. Coleman filled me in on more. She'd moved back in with her parents and lost her job months ago. Something she'd never told me. No wonder she'd planned the divorce so carefully, to secure assets before anyone caught on. Credit card debts she'd hidden. Lies layered on lies. Taylor's evidence had shattered that strategy. A month after the brunch, I moved out of Coleman's place and into a modest studio in Venice. Small, clean, affordable. 20 minutes from work. I picked up extra shifts, saved aggressively. My life shrank to work, gym, home, sleep. Simple, quiet, and strange as it seemed, peaceful. The weight of the marriage lifted, replaced by something fragile but real, hope. But the past had a way of creeping back. She found my new number, probably through work, and sent one text, "I'm sorry. Can we just talk, please?" I blocked her again. Then one day, I saw her car in the work parking lot. My heart slammed against my ribs. I called Ms. Riles before approaching my truck. That night, my attorney sent a cease and desist letter. No more contact attempts after that. But the battle wasn't over. 3 months in, Ms. Riles called with news. My wife was trying to claim I'd abandoned her financially. But the evidence was clear. I paid 70% of the bills, covered the mortgage, and her hidden job loss proved deception. The judge wasn't impressed. The settlement came together swiftly. I kept my truck, my savings, my personal items. She kept the house, though it had minimal equity, and took on the mortgage and her credit card debt. No alimony. Clean break. We signed papers in separate rooms at the courthouse. I never saw her that day. Coleman later told me about whispers at work. A new team lead position opening up with better hours and a salary instead of hourly pay. Interested? He asked. Definitely, I said. 2 weeks later, the promotion was official. First thing I did? Move into a better apartment in Studio City. A 1-bedroom with a tiny patio. The first place that felt truly mine. But just as I thought I was putting the past behind me, life had other plans brewing just around the corner. One Saturday morning, I found myself wandering the aisles of the local Waitrose in Studio City, trying to make sense of my new reality. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the hum of early shoppers, and the soft rustle of plastic bags filled the air. I was picking up essentials. Coffee, eggs, some fruit, when I bumped into someone familiar. Austin. I'd seen her around work, always sharp, quick with a smile, but we'd never really spoken beyond the usual nods in the hallway. She was in the produce section, laughing softly with a friend about the ridiculous price of avocados. The kind of laugh that makes you forget how overpriced everything is. She spotted me, her eyes lighting up. Hey, you're in distribution, right? It felt strange but good to hear someone say my name without judgment. We slipped easily into conversation. Light, casual, nothing heavy. No mention of the divorce, even though everyone at work probably knew by now. She asked about projects, books, movies. Her smile was easy, genuine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Her friend made an excuse to leave, shooting us a knowing look as she went. Austin glanced at me, a touch of boldness in her eyes. This is forward, but want to grab coffee after we check out? There's a place next door. Surprised, I nodded. Yeah, sure. That sounds good. We settled into a small coffee shop nearby, the aroma of espresso wrapping around us like a warm blanket. The conversation flowed naturally, work, favorite films, the quirks of city life. She didn't pry about my past, didn't press for details. It was refreshing. After an hour, as we stood to leave, she smiled. This was nice. Want to do it again? Maybe dinner. Definitely, I said, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months, hope. Over the next few weeks, Austin and I met casually. Dinners at little pubs, catching a movie or two, hiking in the nearby hills. She was easy to be around. No drama. No games, just honest moments that felt like a balm for the wounds I carried. One evening at her apartment, surrounded by the soft glow of fairy lights and the scent of jasmine, she asked quietly, "You doing okay?" Like, really? I paused, stirring my drink. Getting there. Some days better than others. She smiled gently. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Felt different from anything I'd known before. No performance. No pretense. Just partnership. 6 months after that brutal brunch, I was back at the Waitrose in Venice, scanning the aisles when I spotted Taylor again. This time with her 2 kids in tow. She smiled warmly. Hey, how are you? She asked. We talked briefly. Small talk about life, the kids starting a new school year, her husband's recent promotion. I heard things are going well for you, she said. I nodded. Yeah. Really changed everything. Just did what was right. She smiled. Besides, she's not someone I want in my life anyway. Before we parted, Taylor looked me in the eye. You look good. Like genuinely happy. I realized she was right. That night, Coleman dropped by with news from the grapevine. Apparently, my ex was still living with her parents, working part-time retail, and had briefly dated someone new, but it didn't last. She was still posting victim stories online, but fewer people were paying attention. You don't care at all, do you? Coleman asked. Not even a little, I said, and meant it. Life was moving forward. Slowly, quietly, but surely. One evening, Austin and I were cooking dinner in my apartment. A simple, comfortable routine we'd fallen into. She chopped vegetables while I stirred the sauce. The kitchen filled with the sounds of sizzling and laughter. She looked up and asked, Do you ever think about that day? The brunch. I nodded. Sometimes. Not as much as I used to. Best thing that ever happened to me, I admitted, tasting the sauce. Really? Yeah. Forced me to stop settling. Stop making excuses for someone who didn't respect me. Finally choose myself. Austin smiled and went back to chopping, the rhythm of our lives sinking in the quiet kitchen light. As we sat down later on the patio, city lights twinkling in the distance, the conversation drifted and flowed. No judgment, no past, just two people building something real. My phone buzzed with a work email about Monday's schedule. Work stuff? Austin asked. Yeah. Nothing urgent. I put the phone down and turned back to her. Tomorrow I'd go to a job I'd earned. Come home to a place I'd built myself. Maybe see Austin, maybe not. Either way, I'd be fine. Because I'd learned something important. You can't build a future with someone secretly planning your exit. You can't love someone into respecting you. And you can't win a game you didn't know you were playing. But you can walk away, start over, and build something better. One day at a time. And that's exactly what I was doing. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the unexpected happened. I was back at the studio apartment, catching up on emails, when my phone buzzed again with a message from an unknown number. The screen lit up with a simple text. Can we meet? It's important. I frowned, puzzled. The name attached was new, someone I didn't recognize. A quick glance at the message told me it was from a woman named Claire, claiming to be a close friend of my ex-wife's. The message was brief but urgent. I have information you need to know about what's really going on. Curiosity and caution warred inside me. I debated ignoring it, but something in the tone made me reply. All right, where and when? She suggested a small cafe near the pier the next morning at 9 a.m. I agreed, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. The next day, I arrived early, nursing a black coffee as the salty sea air drifted through the open windows. Claire appeared right on time, a woman in her early 30s with sharp features softened by tired eyes. She wore a simple navy dress and a silver pendant that caught the light as she moved. She didn't waste time. Look, I know you're going through hell right now. I'm not here to stir the pot. But I thought you should know that things aren't quite what they seem. I leaned in, intrigued despite myself. Your wife. She's been involved in some pretty shady dealings. Not just the job loss or the debts you mentioned. There's been some financial maneuvering, and it's worse than you think. My heart skipped. What kind of dealings? I asked, voice low. Claire hesitated, glancing around before continuing. I can't say too much here, but she's been funneling money through offshore accounts, hiding assets. It's why she wanted to finalize the divorce quickly, before you caught on. I stared at her, disbelief mixing with anger. Do you have proof? She slid a small USB drive across the table. This is everything I managed to get. Emails, bank statements, transaction records. I know it's a lot to take in, but I thought you should have it. My hands trembled as I pocketed the drive. The weight of it was heavier than I expected. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Claire's eyes softened. Because I don't like lies. And because I think you deserve to know the truth before it's too late. I nodded slowly, the pieces of the puzzle shifting in my mind. This wasn't just about a failing marriage anymore. It was a calculated game of deception on a scale I hadn't imagined. As Claire stood to leave, she added quietly, "Be careful who you trust. Some of her friends are more involved than you think." I watched her go, the cafe suddenly feeling colder. The sea breeze no longer comforting but chilling. Back in the apartment, I plugged the USB into my laptop. Files and folders revealed a tangled web of secret transactions and hidden accounts. Names I recognized, others I didn't. Evidence that could turn the entire divorce on its head. But with that knowledge came a new danger. Who else knew? And how far were they willing to go to keep their secrets buried? The quiet life I was building suddenly felt like it was on the edge of a storm, and I had no choice but to prepare for the fight ahead. The city lights glimmered through the rain-streaked window of my Studio City apartment as I sat hunched over my laptop, the USB drive's contents sprawling across the screen like a twisted tapestry of lies. Emails discussing covert transfers, bank statements with offshore accounts, coded messages between my ex-wife and several unknown contacts. all meticulously hidden beneath layers of deceit. My mind raced. This was bigger than I'd ever imagined. Bigger than just a messy divorce or shattered trust. It was financial sabotage, betrayal on an industrial scale. I called Coleman. He answered on the second ring, his voice steady as ever. "What's going on, mate?" I briefed him quickly, careful to keep my voice low. When I finished, there was silence on the other end before he said, "You're swimming in deep waters now. You need a professional." The next day, I found myself in a sleek office downtown, sitting across from a private investigator named Mark Bennett. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He had that calm, no-nonsense vibe that made me feel like I was finally in capable hands. I laid out everything, the brunch disaster, the screenshots, Taylor's testimony, and now this new evidence. Mark listened intently, nodding as I spoke. "Your ex-wife's been running a covert operation right under your nose," he said gravely. "Offshore accounts, asset concealment, possibly fraud. This isn't just a divorce issue. This could be criminal." I swallowed hard. "What can you do?" Mark smiled thinly. "Day. I find the hidden trails. I follow the money. And I make sure you're protected." Over the next few days, Mark's team worked tirelessly. I kept returning to the apartment, the weight of secrets pressing on me. Every new document uncovered felt like another betrayal, another scar. One evening, as I sifted through the files, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." The warning sent a shiver down my spine. Someone was watching. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. I showed the message to Mark. He frowned. "You're poking a hornet's nest." Despite the threat, I couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything. Then a breakthrough. Mark uncovered a hidden ledger linking my ex-wife's friends, the very same group from brunch, to the financial schemes. It wasn't just her. They were all tangled in it. Betrayal wrapped in friendship. The laughter at that outdoor cafe suddenly took on a darker meaning. That night, I lay awake, the city's hum outside my window a distant drone. The fight wasn't just for my dignity or my future, it was for the truth. And as dawn crept in, I knew one thing for certain. Exposing this web would come at a price. But I was ready to pay it. The following Saturday, the air outside the tiny cafe felt thick with tension. Even though the sky was clear and the sun was just beginning to warm the streets of Brighton. I arrived early, my hands stuffed deep into the pockets of my jacket, heart hammering louder than I wanted to admit. Today I was meeting Melanie, the last of the brunch group still loyal to my ex-wife. She was already there when I walked in, sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a cappuccino. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose bun, wisps escaping to frame a face that looked more tired than the polished woman I'd known. Her expensive sunglasses rested atop her head, and though her designer blouse was crisply ironed, there was a vulnerability in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I sat down opposite her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thanks for meeting me." She nodded, avoiding my gaze. "Look, I didn't want any of this to get messy. I thought if we just ignored it, it'd all blow over." I sighed. "It's not going to blow over. Not now." She hesitated, then leaned in, lowering her voice. I didn't know the full extent of what was going on. I just thought, well, you know how she can be. But when you showed me those messages, the screenshots, it shook me. I saw the conflict in her eyes, the loyalty to a friend battling with the dawning realization of betrayal. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have said something sooner." For a moment, the old tension between us softened. "It's not just about loyalty anymore," I said. "It's about truth. And justice." Melanie swallowed hard. "I want to help. But if she finds out..." Before she could finish, my phone buzzed. I glanced down to see an anonymous text. Asterisk, "Stop digging," or "Next time it won't be a warning." Asterisk. My stomach tightened. The stakes had just gotten higher. Melanie's eyes widened as she saw the message. "You need to be careful. They're watching." I nodded slowly. "I know." We spent the next hour piecing together what Melanie knew. Snippets of conversations, hints dropped in passing, names whispered in hushed tones. It was clear the network was deeper than I'd imagined. As we parted, Melanie pressed a folded envelope into my hand. This might help. Walking away, I felt the weight of every betrayal pressing down, but also a flicker of something new, an unlikely alliance forming in the shadows. Back at my apartment, I opened the envelope. Inside were documents, bank statements, receipts, and a series of emails linking the brunch group directly to the offshore accounts. The truth was no longer hidden, but with it came a chilling question. How far were they willing to go to keep their secrets buried? That night, as rain tapped against the windows, I stared into the darkness, knowing the next move could change everything, and that the game was far from over. The rain hammered against the windows of my studio apartment, each drop like a ticking clock counting down to something inevitable. I sat alone, the documents Melanie had given me spread across the table, the harsh glow of the desk lamp illuminating the tangled web of lies and deceit. Every line, every number told a story of betrayal, not just from my ex-wife, but from the very people she called friends. My phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. "We warned you. Last chance." A chill ran down my spine. They were closing in. I picked up the phone and called Coleman. His familiar voice was a lifeline. "Mate, they're serious. This isn't just about divorce anymore. It's a war." He didn't hesitate. "You need backup. We bring in the big guns." Within days, we had a team, a mix of lawyers, investigators, and trusted friends ready to stand beside me. The quiet life I'd been clawing back was gone, replaced by a fight that demanded every ounce of strength I had. Court dates were set. Evidence was compiled. The media caught wind, and whispers of the scandal began to swirl in the city's undercurrent. My ex-wife and her allies grew desperate, launching a barrage of counterclaims, trying to paint me as the villain. But I had Taylor and Melanie on my side now, their testimonies unraveling the carefully constructed facade. One evening, as I sat in the courtroom waiting for the judge's ruling on a key motion, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, "You think you're winning? The truth is darker than you know. Watch your back." Asterisk. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The shadows around me seemed to grow longer, the stakes higher than ever. Leaving the courthouse, I caught a glimpse of a figure watching me from across the street. A woman with sharp eyes and a knowing smirk. I blinked, and she was gone. The fight was far from over. And somewhere, lurking in the background, a secret waited. One that could shatter everything I thought I knew. As the rain eased and the city lights flickered to life, I realized the battle wasn't just for justice. It was for survival. And the next move belonged to them. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Because in this game, the truth was a weapon, and I was ready to wield it. The courtroom buzzed with muted whispers as the judge prepared to deliver the final verdict. Every eye was fixed on me, the man who had been pulled into a whirlwind of betrayal, deceit, and shattered trust. Months of fighting, uncovering lies, and battling shadows had led to this moment. A moment that would redefine everything. I sat tall, feeling the weight of the past bear down but also the fragile hope of a new beginning. My lawyer whispered something reassuring, but I barely heard it. My mind was elsewhere. On the woman I'd seen watching me from across the street, the mysterious warning texts, the secrets still lurking beneath the surface. Then, the judge's voice cut through the silence, steady and commanding. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimonies, this court finds in favor of the petitioner. The marriage is dissolved, with assets to be divided as presented. Furthermore, the court acknowledges the deliberate concealment of assets by the respondent and has taken appropriate measures. A wave of relief and exhaustion washed over me. It was over, or so I thought. As I gathered my things, my phone buzzed once more. A message from an unknown number. Asterisk, "You've won the battle. But the war is just beginning. Watch your back." Asterisk. I looked up, scanning the crowded room, but no one met my gaze. Outside, the city seemed to hold its breath. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the streets. Austin was waiting, a steady presence amid the chaos. Her hand found mine, warm and grounding. We'll face whatever comes next, she said softly. I nodded, squeezing her hand. Together. But as we walked away from the courthouse, the lingering question remained. Who had sent those messages? Who was still out there, lurking in the shadows, ready to strike? The answers were waiting, and so was the next chapter. Because in the game of love and lies, endings are just new beginnings cloaked in mystery. And I wasn't done yet.